try not to be like the ultimate fanboy because I am such a fan of the incredible Miss Jenny Beavan. With 73 award nominations, 42 awards, 12 Oscar nominations with 3 wins, 13 BAFTA nominations, 4 wins, 8 CDGA nominations, 3 wins, an OBE, and now a CDG Career Achievement Award. We use the word legendary a lot, but your career is truly legendary. With a career spanning over 30 years, Jenny Beavan is one of the most established costume designers with a storied career. We know her beautiful period work from Merchant Ivory films Room with a View, The Bostonians, among others, to wild post-apocalyptic Mad Max, Fury Road, or the unclassifiable Cruella. Let's talk about you. You didn't start out to be a costume designer. You are accidentally a costume designer. Please tell us how you got your start in the business.
I fell in love with the theatre, straight theatre, when I was about 10. And my grandfather, who was a Shakespeare aficionado, decided he had to take me to my first Shakespeare and took me to see Dorothy Tootin in Twelfth Night. And I just loved the whole thing. I didn't really, at that age, appreciate all the different areas, but I knew I just wanted to be part of it. And I held on to that conviction and went to the Central School of Art and Design, which in those days was just a BA, no, it wasn't BA at that point, it was a DIP AD course. But we had a legendary set designer, Ralph Coltire, as our head of department, who was at the peak of his careers and very much a sculptor, and took us to all his shows. You know, we went to the general rehearsals and things, and he did the Ring cycle at ENO, which was legendary. And I never forget that set. And I just thought, that's what I want to do. And that's what I did. So I started in opera and ballet and straight theatre. And then, curiously, when I was 21, I was working at the Welsh Theatre Company, a tiny studio theatre in Splot, Cardiff, and the head of it was Michael Jelliot, who also ran Welsh National Opera. And he was doing Carmen at Covent Garden with Ralph Coltire, my head of department. And Ralph and the conductor, Sir Gail Schulte, argued. And suddenly, Ralph decided he should leave. Schulte wanted a more traditional Carmen. Ralph was doing an incredible sort of abstract, wonderful white wall set. They didn't have a designer. And I remember Michael turned to me and said, did I know Carmen? And I thought, oh, well, because I'm a trainee, Arts Council trainee, he's been told he has to give me projects. So I thought, okay, fine. He said, I said, well, I do know Carmen, but not very well. He said, here's the LP, listen to it. Let's see what you can do for Act 1. So I went off and designed Act 1, made a model, and Michael came and saw it. And his first question was, did I have a passport? Which I thought was an unusual thing. Anyway, I said, yes, I did, and it was in date. And he said, fine, we're going to Frankfurt tomorrow. I was in London, to meet Sir Gail Schulte and show him this model. Anyway, it ended up with me doing it. And then, of course, nobody wanted to do the costumes because no one was going to work with a 21-year-old set designer. And so it was like, okay, you do the costumes, 400 of them. You've got the rocks, the bullring, you've got the, anyway, so I did them. And hugely helped, I have to say, by the Royal Opera House and their team. I think it was obviously in their interest that I didn't fail, because otherwise that would be a very expensive production that didn't work. But actually they were phenomenal to me and totally pulled me through it. But it made me actually appreciate costumes. Anyway, I then ended up doing costumes via a completely different route. But
it was right place, right time, and it was cosmic for you, because costumes weren't your direction.
No, I mean, we were very well taught at college. We were taught history of costume cutting, the whole ethic of how fabrics changed and from medieval times and using it on the cross. And we had Margaret Woodward and Pegaret Anthony, who was an absolute expert from the V&A, to teach us. So I knew what I was doing. And I liked putting the people into my sets, little models, Mm-hmm. But it was not my thing. I thought I was a sculpting.
So you didn't grow up behind your mom stitching and making costumes as a little girl. That was not your
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. My mother, I mean, she could sew, but she was a viola player. My father was a cellist. They were classical musicians in orchestras.
So for educators out there, find great talent. So let's see, how did you first meet and collab with Merchant Ivory? Because that really set your career off.
That's the other side of my story, so that's great. When I was 3, this wonderful mother, who was very alternative, we ate nut rissoles and ran around barefoot foot and went to alternative schools. She sent me to a music and movement dance class, not your average ballet. And I met a boy called Nick Young, who ended up on the South Bank Show, which was a fantastic arts program in Melvin Bragg ran on ITV. And he'd come up via Westminster School and Oxford, but he'd met a boy called Richard McCrory, and Richard McCrory's father had got to know Merchant Ivory. And so Richard and Nick, my friend from the dance class, started to work with them if they were in London, because it was all nothing. I mean, there was never any money involved. And then I would sort of pitch along if they needed me, and I could drive from quite an early age. I mean, legally, but, you know, I did learn early. And so I was very useful because I had access to a car. It wasn't mine, but I had access. And somehow so when Nick went to the South Bank Show, he commissioned a film from Merchant Ivory called Hullabaloo over Bonnie and George's Pictures, and it involved 3 art dealers making for Jaipur in India to find a legendary collection of miniature paintings they actually all wanted to steal. The English art collector was Dame Peggy Ashcroft, so Nick rang and said, would I go and help Dame Peggy get a wardrobe of clothes together for this part? She was sort of an eccentric English art dealer travelling overland to India. Highly improbable, but... and so I went, and my second visit to her, she said, my dear, she said, we're getting on quite well. Now, I've never been to India before, and I'm a little bit nervous. They've given me a first-class ticket. If I change it for 2 economies, will you come with me? So I end up, actually not Jaipur, Jodhpur, Rajasthan, with Dame Peggy Ashcroft, and immediately become part of the family. I do crowd collecting, I do props, I do costumes, I do looking after Dame Peggy and all her needs, and, you know, just generally being. And then, of course, I ended up acting in it because the actress who was supposed to come up from Bombay, as it was then called, for some reason couldn't. It was Jennifer Kendall. I can't remember why she couldn't, but anyway. So they just turned and said, Jenny, you will do it. Ismail quite often said to me, Jenny, you will do it. And that's how that all started. And then I just became part of the family because I was willing to do anything. You know, tea, coffee, you name it.
Accidental costume designer. So your career has been so diverse. So when we think of Jenny Beavan as synonymous with The Room with a View and Howard's End, Sense and Sensibility, but Mad Max and Furiosa are part of your recent work. How have you not been pigeonholed? I think it's just that, you know, your creativity.
I think I was pigeonholed. I mean, up until Mad Max, really. And it was Ian Smith, who I'd done Alexander for. And I can't remember why he asked me to do Alexander, but there was a reason. And I ended up doing it. And it was a massive thing to do very, very quickly. And also we were away.
You came in and saved Alexander. You didn't have much prep on that.
No, I didn't. But it worked out, and that's how I met Liz. And but actually, it meant that when George Miller, his designer, Norma Morrisseau, decided she didn't want to do Fury Road in Namibia.
I think that would scare a lot of costume designers. I get that.
Well, she'd done Road Warrior. She was part of that, but I think by that time she was quite ill, although she was keeping it very quiet. And she was older than I am. So I think it was just a year in Namibia and she'd done Namibia, which is a wonderful country, but it's tough to work in. Mm-hmm. And so that she didn't want to do it. So Ian, who was a producer on it, said to me, would I go out and meet George? So I did. I was sent to Sydney, met George, seemed to like me, and I got the job.
They're going to do Mad Max. I'm like, let's get the woman from Room with a View. That
quite right.
Which I think this speaks more to your personality and the trust that you instill on people.
Well, it seemed to work out, but he honestly, I can't thank him enough because he completely opened up my career.
Let's talk about that detail. What is your research process? How do you pick up a script? Where do you start?
Get the script, and if I like it, and the director's keen to meet me, then we obviously meet either physically or on Zoom now. And quite often when I read a script, I can see it. I see the colours. Corella's obvious, red, white and black. And I've seen quite a lot of films in strange olivey green and aubergines, but I sort of see it. And then research these days is, of course, the internet, because it's so brilliant and so quick. It used to be trailing around the V&A, the Courtauld, galleries, wherever. But now it's so much easier finding images. And then I do about 4 things at once. I list, often by hand, all the needs in each character. I research, I make mood boards, and I suppose I start looking for the clothes. Obviously, things like Alexander, you can't just go and rent them. So we prototyped the coral, which is incredibly low budget, Cosprop, just pulling from the racks and then putting the stuff on the stand to show Nick Heitner, the director. And, that's my way of doing it. It's always on stands, always 3D.
Visual.
To give it the sense. And with the mood boards, you can create the feeling that you're going for until you know who the actors are, because that's what will really inform what it looks like.
Absolutely. I was just rewatching Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, and you think like, wow, those are so beautiful. And then it occurred to me, she had to build a Dior collection. Now, tell us about that, because you did that in Bulgaria?
No, Hungary. We did it in Budapest.
And you must have had a $2-3 million budget.
Me? I think the whole film was 11, if I remember rightly. No, I have to be honest, I was lied to. Now, this is a lesson to everybody. So I was asked to do the job, and the director said to me, oh, darling, you'll be working alongside Dior. Dior will do all the Dior, anything that's Dior, they'll do. And if you want something made for Madame Colbert, they'll make it for you. So we end up in the archives in Paris, which are fascinating. And Madame Choisy-Kpaf, who is the chief archivist, incredibly helpful. But I'm looking at this stuff and thinking, we're not going to be using this. We're looking at it with white gloves on, and there's very little of it, because in 1957, Dior made the collection, they sold it, they moved on. They didn't keep anything for the archives. So there's a lot of pieces of Dior, but they tend to be in Japan, in private collections, if anything survived.
So there was no Dior archive to go through, because they
Not
sold
really.
them all.
We saw a few pieces, and the red dress she wears at the end is definitely based on a Dior that's in the wardrobes, beautifully, beautifully kept in, white cloth and all that. But there's very little there. And so anyway, we're sitting around the table at the end of the afternoon, and sort of silence occurs, and I think, I better say something. So I go, thank you so much for this amazing afternoon. It's been an absolute inspiration. I've learned such a lot. It's been wonderful. And what's brilliant is to know you will be working with me on this project. And 4 horrified faces on the other side of the table went, no. And I thought, okay, take a deep breath. I said, that's not quite what I've been led to expect. Now, I've got 2 producers and the director there, but I can't quite see them. So I said, okay, I do know people who understand Dior and can make Dior. John Bright of Cosprop and Jane Law, one of the most wonderful cutters in the world. I said loudly, but it will be very expensive. Because I thought if I got it out there in the open, then there was no, and it wasn't as expensive as having it made by haute couture, obviously, but it still was, in their budget, an awful lot of money.
They were like, we're going to have a coffee with you and show you some things, but that's it. But
that was exactly right. Yeah, and very helpful. I mean, they even gave me a photocopy of the actual book of the 57 collection, where you get the drawing, tiny drawing, you get the fabrics, you get the notes, and I thought, this is amazing. And I took it carefully home to London. I gave it to Cosprop because I don't collect stuff. I mean, it wouldn't be any good to me, and it's a shame.
You had to build every single dress in that runway show, then?
No, not every single one. Curiously, the Puerto Rico dress was at Cosprop. We found it on the rack. Someone had given it to John in a collection. An original, but the inside had been stripped out. It didn't say Dior, but I had it verified by Dior, because we had a Dior. Justine was with us when we did the show. She absolutely verified it was. So we rebuilt the inside. But that dress is real. And if you look at it on, what was her name? She's a wonderful Portuguese actress. Because there is a bit of film of that show with the model wearing it. You can see it is exactly the same dress. And Justine said, It will be one that turns up because it was very popular and a lot were made. Because it's a cotton dress with polka dots. It's navy blue with white.
Gotcha.
So that was a real one. We had 5 in the end from what they call their archive collection, which is actually remakes. And we
Okay.
reckon they were remade in the 90s, but they were black and white. And you think, Mrs. Harris isn't going to go for black and white. She's got all the way to Paris. She loved the mauve dress that, she'd
Yes.
seen in her.
That dress was stunning. Was that one you created?
Yeah, we created that.
That was stunning.
That was a real challenge because normally with a dress like that, it comes to life when you put it on a body, but nobody wears
Hanger
it.
appeal.
Nobody wears it, so it had to have hanger appeal.
Wow. So going from Mrs. Harris to Mad Max, you returned to Mad Max and you're sort of revisiting the aesthetic, but you didn't because it was a different era in Mad Max.
Yeah, we were earlier, which was curious. So we're and we're doing the Furiosa story. And obviously lots of new characters, and it's a much longer film. It takes place over 15 years. And but George didn't want huge changes. But in the script, you know what happens to Furiosa, how she escapes and then grows as a mechanic, and then she becomes the warrior, and all that sort of happens. So that's all there. But she's got to end up as Charlize.
Yes.
Because that's the whole point.
But I think, when you designed the first one, you didn't know you'd be returning to it. So you...
No, I didn't. I knew he wanted to do this story, which I thought was so horrific. I hoped he didn't ask me to do it, because anything where someone hacks their arm off is way out of my comfort zone. But then somehow the way he does it isn't as horrific as you think. It's sort of brave. I mean, I can't quite get my head around how George works, but it does work.
This is such a stereotype. I think that Jenny Bevan sitting around drinking tea, and then I watch those costumes. I'm like, what drugs was Jenny doing? Because what you've come up with is so beautiful. Every costume is an art piece.
Every film, you get your inspiration from completely different sources. Furiosa, George Miller is so phenomenal as a director and as someone who can guide you. And then he loves it when you bring stuff to him, but it's a complete collaboration. So the inspiration is, he comes to the workroom and workshop and, it's very, very part of it. I guess, I don't know. I mean, he has such a thing about everything has to have purpose. So I think our costumes, however bonkers they are always there to protect the body. I like the toe jammers at the beginning, or the Rubilis, the gang who kidnap her. It's all about motorbike riding and riding through deserts. And we are only 45 years from the apocalypse. Because when I asked George when it happened, so I got a sense, he said, 45 years ago, last Wednesday. So you know exactly where you are with the apocalypse. And that's actually, things last 45 years.
Yes.
I mean, we've all got motorbike jackets, seen them that are over 100 years old, or barbers or stuff, that does leather work, lasts. So it gives you a reason that you can use it. Because George doesn't like anything that isn't real.
Let's talk about your team, because I'm seeing the detail. And now that we get to see them in close in person, what is your team like? Who do you surround yourself with?
Well, Australia, it was a completely new team. Mel Dykes was our supervisor, who'd supervised in Namibia. But in Namibia, we used a local team of very clever young people who made wonderful leatherwork for the tourist industry. And obviously they didn't come to Australia. So in Australia, we had this new to me team of phenomenally clever makers. And I don't know what colleges they go to, or NIDA is one, but they seem to be brilliant at very organic costume prop making. So I have this incredible team of cutters who seem to be able to do anything, very organic, all brought together by Mel, who knows it backwards, because she joined the George Miller thing on Thunderdome, I think. And she's just amazing. I think she has retired now. So I'm, I don't know what I'd do if I went back to Australia without Mel, but it was an amazing team. And we feed the ideas in.
And you did that remotely too, right?
Sorry?
You did that remotely. You were in COVID. So
Right, yes, we started remotely. It started in April of the year before. We were in Prague, me and Lauren Rahani. We were doing Whitebird, and we got a call from Doug Mitchell saying, we need to do something. We've got to get something in the can by June to hold a New South Wales tax exemption. And we don't know who the principals are, but we might see them in the war rig, and we're going to do the mortifiers as a stunt team, and this is what. Blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, fine. And so we started, and FaceTiming back, because Mel had set up a workroom in Sydney, and then suddenly New South Wales didn't need the tax thing, so we could relax. But by that time, they had the workroom running, and they didn't want to lose it because of Thor, Aquaman, and all the other films coming into Sydney. So we kept going, and we literally did, I think it was only a 3-day week, but we did it. I mean, I worked on that film for over 18 months. It was extraordinary. But we couldn't go to Australia because they were behind us in COVID. And they did that quarantine thing where you had to stay in a hotel room for 2 weeks, and that really wasn't going to work. So we started in London, back in my house, my sitting room, and my hapless friend Joe, we had him on stands, these ghastly creatures in the sitting room. And Joe came back one night, nearly had a heart attack, because he obviously slightly pissed, and met the Rubillies, or something. I can't remember what. Anyway, it was hilarious, and we thought this isn't going to work. And by the end, you couldn't see the sitting room floor for stuff, and Lauren was dying and making stuff all out the back in the garden, which thank God I got. Dying with natural leaves and stuff to see. We were doing, and then I had Stephen, my friend, the one who I mentioned before. He's a fantastic maker. So he was doing prototype bits, and Emily Spreadborough and Tom Botwood, my artist friend, started drawing, and it was just the 5 of us. But actually, loads of what we did in England ended up in the film, which I'm really thrilled. We got a tiny studio around the corner eventually, and that really helped. But by the time we finished, it was stuffed full. And we sent something like 35 or 40 boxes, those Eurocrates, from that studio out to Sydney.
So you did build some in London?
We did build in London, but real prototypes and real ideas and we were sending the photos, it's so wonderful these days, backwards and forwards, for George and Mel. And she was doing stuff for the mortifiers and these stunt guys on motorbikes and sending, it was all very backwards and forwards.
But you've been doing this for 30 years, so you must have a team in London at ACD.
I have 2 teams. I love to work with Claire Sprague team and Marcus Scotti team.
Have you had the same assistants for,
I have normally an assistant sort of for about 5 years, and then they become designers or whatever.
So I'm curious to who assisted Jenny Beavan, who were your former assistants?
So Lauren Rahani has been amazing. She was, which did we started on Mrs. Harris. So she did Mrs. Harris, Whitebird, Furiosa, and The Coral with me. And then before that was Sarah Young, who did Doolittle, Cruella. Something else, I had Charlotte Law, Jane Law's daughter, who's phenomenal. Before that, Anna, and Stephen actually was one of my assistants and chief maker. So, but, they've just been one after another, really.
And how did you meet the lovely Liz Wolfe, who's an American CDG member?
Liz and I have known each other. We're sort of sisters from a former life, I reckon. Completely.
Sisters from another mister.
Yeah, exactly. I was asked to come I was doing a film called Possession, which is a fascinating book, which is a dual thing of 1860s and modern with Gwyneth Paltrow. And it's the modern story is sort of pushed by the 1860s story. And I had to come over here to fit Gwyneth, but they didn't want, it was low budget, of course, they didn't want me to bring an assistant with me. And so my supervisor, Kenny Crouch, said, Liz will help. He knew Liz. And so we bonded over everything in the 4 seasons, wasn't it? And then when I did Alexander, I needed what we call it in Australia, an art finisher, but it's a breaker down age or dyer. And I couldn't find one in England. And I don't know why I was looking for one, but anyway, so I rang Liz and said, did she know? And I said, well, I used to be Colleen Atwood's, and I thought, well, that's good. So out she came. And do you know what the wonderful side effect of all that was? Well, being totally brilliant. She met Mustafa, and they have a son together, Cash, who's now 20. And so it's lovely. I mean, there's all these nice extra stories.
Yeah, because it's just, I mean, it's like I said, it's accidental. It's like so many stories you've told me over the years have just sort of an accidental, but I think
They are.
It's karma and cosmic.
Well, yeah, must have done something right in a former life.
Yes. So you've costume designed so many diverse projects in different periods. Do you have a favorite genre like you love going back to?
No.
No. And is there a period of clothes that you haven't had a chance to design yet? Is there something you would love to get your teeth into?
There are a few, but by now I'm more interested in the story and whether the story is good, I think, than what period it is. I haven't done Elizabethan. I've never actually done Roman. I did Macedonian, which is different, Greek Macedonian with Alexander. But I don't feel a terrible need to do them because other people do them very well. And, you know,
Do you ever want to do a contemporary, shopped movie?
I've just done one and it was not much fun. I'm not very contemporary myself. So.
Well, you've just,
The problem is there's so much choice because you've got every shop out there. You've got so many opinions because everybody wears clothes.
Yes.
Loves to have an opinion. And to be honest, I'm beyond that now. I'm just really happy murgling about doing whatever. And I do love a bit of,
fluff,
apocalypse and oddities. I do enjoy an oddity, yeah.
So what do you do when you're not costume designing? What are your hobbies? Dirt bike racing?
Sorry?
Dirt bike racing?
Probably not. I love gardening, and I'm very lucky in London to have an extraordinary garden, which most people would have sold off the end of it to have built, but it's just wonderful. It's like
space in London is amazing.
Yeah, and the country, it's that sort of sense of being in the country, but you're in London, because I really don't want to live anywhere but London. Dirty, noisy, irritating London. Love it. I was born and brought up there. But when my shoulder's not so bad, in the family, we play, once say play is an optimistic word, music. We massacre hapless Baroque composers. I'm the cellist. The others are actually rather good. I'm not, but we do have fun.
But you have two musician parents. What instruments do you play?
Play, as I said, is optimistic. I learnt piano, cello, and flute.
Oh, wow.
And cello is the one I love cello music, but I'm not very good, but I really enjoy it, and I can count like crazy, so I normally know where I am. But, I mean, it's most extraordinary thing, music, to be in the middle of it. It's so exciting, and I think music, even though I'm a film person, theatre, I think in schools and for children, music should be absolutely made, everybody should be made to play something, because whatever it is, rap, jazz, pop, classical, you name it, singing it, it just is the greatest fun, as well as the most incredibly liberating, calming, therapeutic. I mean, to me, music is the best.
I can totally see there's a musical theme behind you whenever you get up in the morning.
There so is.
So the CDG Career Achievement Award is to celebrate your career so far. So at this midpoint in your career, I know you're never going to retire because you love this so much. What are you working on now?
There's several projects coming up if they can get, particularly the independent films, if they can get funded. There's a massive crisis at the moment with funding the really good scripts, but independent films, because partly Americans are not sending money. I think my daughter's an independent film producer with Genesius Pictures, who did Good Luck to You, Leo Grand. And if you haven't seen that, you must see it. It's absolutely extraordinary with Emma Thompson.
Love that film.
And so she's really my informant on what's happening in that whole world of independent film. I have a possible big project, but I haven't got it yet. I mean, it may happen, who knows?
Yeah.
And would happen in London, which would be great. Because I'm away such a lot.
I think that everybody thinks that it's slow in LA, it's really busy in London. It's slow in London,
It's very slow in London. I think it will pick up. They're saying in April there's some tax help for independent films, or films below a $15 million budget. It might be £15 million. And the ones I tend to enjoy doing tend to be those, because they're really good. The Choral, I think we made on 8 million, which is 1916, First World War, Alan Bennett script, Nick Heitner directing, Ray Fiennes as our leading. It's I've seen the final cut and it's absolutely brilliant, heartbreaking and hilarious, and made on a shoestring.
And I think that it's a testament to your career. It's like, even at this point in your career, you'd think that people would follow you as the expert, but you probably still have to fight for everything you do as a costume designer.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think as you get more experience, you know how to fight in
Thank
a
you.
more productive way without being ever rude
Fight / manipulate.
Exactly, yeah. And
Make it think it's their idea.
And also because of the experience, they know if I say we cannot do it on that, I'm right. But we will try and do it, for as little as possible, and always keep everyone informed. Never don't do anything where you spend money and you haven't told everybody what you're doing. I mean, the more information everybody has, the better. But yeah, I fight. And the funny thing in Australia was we were in this enormous, disgusting workshop right out in the suburbs, industrial suburbs, and they honestly didn't have enough hand wash stations or loos. And there were tons of us. We had the whole of props, art department. We were all there in the one space, which was brilliant. So you could dress your actor and then take him to meet his vehicle and, and find the props and all that. But equally, it was just it wasn't very clean. And so I made a real fuss to production about it. I thought, this is ridiculous. Then we went to the Outback and the same thing. I was saying, we need cleaners. So it wasn't the costumes, it was the facilities.
But I mean, when you were doing Mrs. Harris and they thought that Dior wasn't built everything for you, and they had to adjust their budget to accommodate, even though you weren't spending lavishly.
They did. They tried to make me use a Hungarian team to make the costumes, who may have been all right, but I'd never heard of them. Nobody could, and it was just too big a risk, to be honest. And I knew that John and Jane, they made things that Dior absolutely approved of, because Dior had to approve what we did. Absolutely. And they're such artists, John Brighton, because John is a cutter as well as owns Cosprop.
I would love you talk a little about your relationship with John Bright and how that started. And I mean, it's sort of legendary. Jenny Bevan, John Bright, it's synonymous.
Well, John ran Cosprop. So another of Jenny You Will Do It, Ismail moments was on the Bostonians. I was going to be Judy Moorcroft's assistant. I'd done Hullabaloo, obviously, as a whatever. I'd then done Jane Austen in Manhattan as a designer, which was another South Bank show, television. And I'd been the Lee Remick's dresser and Judy's assistant and everything on the Europeans. I mean, there were three of us did the whole film, as we did in those days. We didn't have crews, like you do now. We did Room with a View with four of us in Florence.
Wow.
Dressing and undressing all the crowd, which was quite something. Every day. And I was pregnant and I always forgot to do their boots. I had to do their boots because I always forgot to make them put their boots on before I did the corsets up. Anyway, whatever. But anyway, back to the Bostonians. So Judy was going to do the Bostonians, and then she got offered David Lean's Passage to India. I was her assistant, and literally Ismail turned around to me and said, Jenny, you will do it. And it was like, ooh, okay. And I was really green and learning. And John absolutely led me through it. And then came out we started Newport, Rhode Island, doing a massive party scene. And it looked great. I mean, 1870s party scene, costumes, it has to look good. And I was saying, Jenny, it's really beautiful. And I thought, it does look beautiful, but I did not do this on my own. So I said to John, I think we did this together. I think we should have a co-credit. And he was really thrilled, because I wasn't sure when you own a costume house, whether you want to be known as a designer, whether it helps, Anyway, he was thrilled. And I think we did 12 films together after that, not always Merchant Ivory. And we were just a fantastic partnership. Cosprop would start at 5:30 in the afternoon. I would put the kettle on. We'd have a cup of tea, and then we'd do an hour to a couple of hours, depending on our project. He'd rootle around in the deep recesses because he knew where stuff was that I wouldn't. I would be doing the storytelling, putting it, and between us, it was just easy and wonderful. He's still one of my best friends in the world.
I love that. I love that collaboration. Well, we're in a room full of people who love costumes, so I'm sure the audience has questions.
I'm such a fan of your work, Jenny, but I'm a fan of you you are just your humility, your camaraderie, the way you take the time to speak to so many people. I think that's not always the case. So I want to say, number one, I'm a fan of you. Number two, have you ever heard of the Death Guild?
What?
The Death Guild at Burning Man. Have you ever heard of this group?
I've heard of Burning Man, but no, I haven't heard of that group. No.
Okay. So I have an ex-boyfriend, okay? Every year, and they take it seriously, they prep for a year in these costumes. So they started out with Mad Max, and now they've done your past 2 movies. Every year I get questions. Can you ask that woman how she did this? These are your costumes on grown adults. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're artists. They take your stuff so seriously. So not only do you have fans among us, you have fans among these people that live and breathe nothing in this world until they know Burning Man's coming up. And so if you ever want to take a look, it's called the Death Guild. They have redone your costumes with this heart, and they prep. They go, okay, I don't know how to paint this. And they always ask me, how'd she do this? How'd she do this? And so I think it's a testament to how amazing your work is, not just the Furiosos, but everything that you do.
Thanks, Mandy.
My pleasure.
Anybody else?
Everybody wants to know about Cruella. It was so epic, and it just energized costume design at that moment. It was beyond just us. It captured the imagination of everybody. So can you tell us, like, you started to kind of dig through there with this great subject matter, but then in your hands, it became something so much bigger. How do you do that? How do you track that? How do you follow?
I don't really know, because it's all instinct. It's not, I don't think it through and do it for, So Cruella, every time I did a Disney project, and they were always wonderfully origin stories. I had to do a remake animation, which I always thought was rather sad, because I loved the animation, the little mice in Cinderella and all that. But basically, every time I did a Disney project, the team was always going to go on to Cruella. And one day I said, what is Cruella? And they said, oh, it's, this 1970s fashion thing, whatever, Dalmatians. And I thought, oh, thank God I'm not doing that. Fashion is not my thing. And Sandy Powell was always going to do it. And I thought, oh, well, that's brilliant. It's so Sandy. Anyway, they suddenly got a window of opportunity in Emma Stone's schedule. And it was like, go, go, go. And Sandy completely correctly said, there isn't enough time. And so Kristen Burr rang me and said, I can't remember what I'd done with Kristen, but something, was I available? And I thought, yes. And so I went to meet Craig Gillespie and looked at the mood boards and stuff and thought, I remember walking away thinking, I can't do this. And then I rang Claire Spragg, one of my fabulous supervisors in London. She said, oh, yes, we can. And I thought, okay, if Claire says we can, we can. We had 10 weeks to put it together. Wow. So I remember the 70s. I sort of was a little bit interested in clothes. Beavan was around, Bus Stop. There were others very interesting. I really loved the big things. And the thing, we wore a short sleeve T-shirt over a sort of blossoming shirt and loons and wedge shoes, which meant I was slightly higher, which was always nice. But so I had a really good memory of the 70s. And there was something about it that the story wasn't very good at that moment. They had many writers on it. Dale Tony McNamara came and really sort of pulled it together. But it was slightly all over the place, but you knew you ended up on Glen Close. That's you knew you were taking her on an arc to get there. And there were lots of lovely moments and things in the script, like her anarchy as a child, being very alternative. So that was all really good fun.
I mean, when I saw that young Cruella, I was like, that's young Jenny Beavan.
It wasn't far off, actually, yeah. Wearing anything inside out, back to front and under, yeah. But I saw it pretty quickly in the colours, red, black and white. That wasn't a problem. And I kind of obviously had seen the Dalmatians, knew Anthony Powell's work. There were lots of sort of things I knew. And I found with that the best thing to do was to go to, in fact, I was here and went to all this terrific 70s stuff in the costume houses here.
Yes.
But also Portobello on a Friday morning is one of my favourite places because I just get inspiration looking at clothes, which I'm not particularly fond of, but when I'm doing stories with them, I love them. So I went to Portobello every Friday morning, and I was in any vintage stores, costume houses. Angels had quite a lot. Cosprop doesn't really do 70s, so it stops around the 60s, early 60s. But finding the stuff, and then here in some wonderful secondhand shops I know, Play Clothes and all that here in LA area, I put together looks on the stand along with looks. I found Nina Hagen, the German singer, very, very inspirational for the transition Cruella. And there were lots of bits. And then I came over to meet Emma Stone, who was living in Malibu, and we had absolutely tons of clothes by this time. And we fitted her in her kitchen. It was really gentle and fun and real. And Craig came, and we got about, I would say, 20 beginnings of looks on that session. And then she came to England, and we had to go at some more looks, which by this time I was making in the workshop. And then the most wonderful thing happened, not for Emma, but for us. She slipped and broke her collarbone. And it was like she was mortified. And
Not in your fitting.
No.
I was like, wait.
No. I think it was at a concert or something, and it was just slippery and, just a complete accident. And I said, "Oh God, if you're not in too much pain, you've given us the lifeline we need," because we had 6 weeks, and we were already going at extra 6 weeks.
Gotcha.
Such speed that we just kept the speed
So
going.
note to everybody: when you need more time, have your actor strip.
Yes, it's a really good trick actually. But anyway, she recovered really well, but she was so physical in that film and there's very little stunts. I can't remember a stunt in it. I mean, she's in the trash dress. She walks up on the car.
That trash dress is such an iconic for the rest of our lives. That vision. Oh my God.
It was fun.
And I mean, how was that scripted? I mean, how much of that was you?
Totally scripted.
Totally scripted.
Oh yeah. I mean, the 3 photobomb opportunities were completely scripted.
But you brought them to life.
Well, yes. I mean, it was the logistics of them, because they all had to be heavy enough to do whatever
How do you even test that out?
Oh, well, we start in the workroom. We put one of the makers into it and walked it up and down. We had a huge long workroom at Shepperton, so we just cleared a space and walked her up and down. Then we took it out to Leavesden, to what's called the runway. Leavesden was an old airport, strip, and we had it
Tied a costumer to the back of a car and.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a truck. Wow. But yeah, and so we knew it would work. We tested, and the one that she walks on the car, because that was a real test to get the right weight so she could walk up on the car and it wasn't too heavy. But equally, when she swooshed it round, it landed at the right place, so the Baroness disappeared.
Yeah.
It was really. And that was Kirsten Fletcher from Australia who made that, who does wonderful things for the world of wearable art. I mean, she's a construction sort of costume maker. I had different. Dom Young was the tailor. Ian. Oh, glory! I've completely forgotten his name. Ian. He's brilliant. Anyway, I'll remember it.
And the moth dress, the bug dress.
Yeah.
That's CGI.
Yeah. We did a sample of it. So we did chrysalises or they were beans or whatever they were, on a piece of cloth, so they could photograph that and then use it. But I think the CGI on Cruella was exceptionally good.
I did not know. I was trying to ask you how you built that when you told me the story. I was like,
We did the shape of it. Dom did the shape, and we did the piece so that they knew exactly what it was like, and then they took the two and put them together.
And your illustrator friend Tom did the illustrations for the movie?
Yeah. He did. He was the hand of Cruella, so anything she drew, he drew. He did the Liberty's window revamp.
Ah, yes.
That's Tom, and
So he's truly an artist. He's not just an
he's
illustrator.
an artist. We sort of bounce off each other. So he doesn't do conventional costume drawings, whatever they're called. He does inspiration ideas.
I'm so fascinated with the craftsmanship of filmmaking, especially with clothing, and of obviously like cutting fabrics and scissors. You've had a legacy working over the decades, and I'm wondering, like, are there any technical things that you appreciate when you first started out versus the new technology, like using like CGI? Like, is there anything that you still keep that you've had from the very beginning, and when you're going forward with your with your costume design?
I haven't changed my attitude, and I try and do everything so it works in camera. If they then CGI it, I mean, sometimes they enhance it, or if something's happened that they need to improve. But I try not to, it's not part of my thing.
You keep it old school.
Yeah, I'm old school, and I think it works best that way. And even though Furiosa has a massive amount of CGI, there wasn't a grain of sand in Australia. The whole, however, 8 months we were filming, not a grain, and yet the whole film is sand.
Wow.
But the costumes are absolutely straight, I'm pretty sure. Although when George Miller rings you at 7:00 on a Sunday evening saying, Jenny, hello, Jenny, it's George. And you think, I know it's George, my phone just told me. And I know it's 7:00 and I know what you're going to say. And he says, I've had an idea. And you think, oh, crikey, of course you have. And it will be for first shot on Monday. And you get it there, yeah. And then you say, oh, George, I'm sorry. If we'd given us a bit longer, it would look better. Don't worry, Jenny. We'll fix it in post. And you think, no. So I find the whole CGI thing quite tricky because they can change what you do, and I do it. But
Real.
On the whole, people don't seem to change. I haven't noticed it to any detriment.
Good.
I mean, obviously what was wonderful was like when the dress burns, the white cloak burns. We didn't have to do that. That's completely CGI.
I have a question. Are you in post when they start to do the CGI?
No,
like you have
absolutely
control,
not.
like how they treat.
No.
Oh, wow.
No, I don't do
should
any
change.
post. I mean, I guess if they really wanted to ask me, they would, but no one ever has. So I finish the minute the film finishes.
Thank you.
Great pleasure.
Obviously a huge fan because I'm here. I have a two-part question. The first is you got to work with the late, great Alan Rickman, who was a huge champion of costume designers. So the first part of my question was wondering if you had any wonderful stories or anecdotes about costume designing for him.
Alan, he was absolutely wonderful. He was quite caustic. I don't remember anything very specific, actually. It was just heaven when he was around. And I was seeing that little bit of him in the sizzle reel, where he just leans against the door. And I did theatre with Alan as well. I did all sorts with him. I mean, he was very much part of my life. But I'm sorry, I can't think of any stories particularly, except it was just lovely when he was there. And he was very funny. He was very funny.
So then part two of my question is, I too am the kind of costume designer who is always painting on the costumes as well, and making a mess of our house, getting things ready whenever we need to, and taking over. And so do you have any advice for the spouses of people like you and I?
Divorce. Yeah, anyhow, I have to say, Furiosa is the only one I've ever had to do from home, and it was the COVID, and we just had to start at home, and then it all got too much. You really couldn't move in, and it was a bit much coming down to breakfast with the Rubillies, so we moved. But I don't keep anything either. I don't want anything after a film. Not interested in. All I want's the DVD.
No archives at home.
Sorry?
No archives at home.
No, I've given everything.
There's no room with all the awards. Where would you put them?
Obviously. No, I gave all my paperwork. In the old days, you had about 60 files after a film. Now, of course, it's in to the BFI, the British Film Institute, and we're going to work on my digital stuff next. The Academy were interested, but I thought I am English, I'm British. I think it should stay there, and it's available to anybody who wants to look at it. It's in their archives in Berkhamsted. But I am going to work with them to now get rid, because I've got so much on my computer and hard drives and whatever. It's just it's got to go somewhere. It'd be a waste sort of for it not to be somewhere.
Agreed.
Anyway, that's, yeah, but no. Home, I would,
Happily single.
Thank you.
great pleasure.
Hi, thanks so much for speaking with us today. The sense that I get is that the theme running through your career has been a sense of courage to do the very low budget, courage to go to India and get coffee, courage to do these gigantic projects that span across international boundaries and time zones. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about when the time is to not be brave, when the time is to not take the project that doesn't have the right amount of funding or the right time to do it the right way, or whether you always just think, let's dive in and make it happen.
I think the reason I wouldn't take a project if I didn't find it ethical or it was too violent. Now, I say that and then people say, oh, you did Furiosa. And I'm thinking, I know, but George's violence, I think, is different. And even my sister, who always said, oh, Jen, I'm not going to see it. It's not my kind of film. Yeah. And I said, okay, I'm going to, discommunicate you, really. And she went to see it and she said, I loved it. And I thought, I don't like violence. I don't go to films that are violent. I can't bear horror films. Absolutely scared rigid, even though I know they're, the art of illusion. But I think if a film like The Coral, the script was probably the best script I've ever read, this Alan Bennett script. Look him up if you don't know who he is. He's phenomenal. He's 90 now. English playwright, screenwriter, book writer, and national icon. He wrote this extraordinary, he was born and brought up in Yorkshire, son of a butcher, so he utterly understands this mill town in Yorkshire in 1916. And so I read it, and I didn't actually care what the budget was, I wanted to do it. And Nick Heitner, who used to run the National Theatre, I'd never worked with, but we'd kind of met, and he thinks we did know each other. So we had a huge amount of people in common in theatre. But I swear we had met once that I've never forgotten, but equally hadn't even thought about it. You know what I mean? He rings up and says, would I do it? And it's like, absolutely. I didn't even question the budget. And then when I saw the budget, I thought, we might be able to do it. We'll give it a go. Because in Yorkshire in 1916, in a mill town, they didn't have many clothes. So like Cranford, which I did on a minute budget, they didn't have many clothes. They were poor as church mice, the Judi Dench lot, in Cranford. And it gives it a truth and a reality. So I knew we could do it on very minimal clothing. There weren't any stunts in it that would require huge amounts of doubles. We had the issue of the guy who loses his arm in the war, but you do it the same way every time. You make the arm do that, and you do your best to put sensible clothing on. Actually, belts really help. It's curious. And you make sure they shoot it in the right way, and you totally get away with it. So I think it was pretty straightforward. The only problem was we had local choral societies because they're doing the Dream of Gerontius. So we had real choral people from Yorkshire who were quite big, because singers tend to be quite big. And the stock there wasn't a lot of stock. There isn't a lot of civilian stuff done in 1916. So we had to so we did sort of factory makes and then, accessorize them. That was a bit of an extra expense, but yeah, on the whole, it was, I would have done it whatever. And then I talked to the producers about the fact we needed more money, and they completely got it. So, it was fine. But if you talk to people, never keep a secret that you're going over budget, because it's not worth it. Everything goes wrong.
This is not the time to ask for forgiveness instead of permission.
Sorry?
Not the time to ask for forgiveness instead of permission.
No,
ask
it's
permission.
much better. I've learned, and of course with the internet, it's so much easier to keep everybody informed. Everything from your director can see every fitting almost as you do them. So there's never a problem that, you're showing something that's a surprise on set. Right. Just use every bit of sharing. It's collaborative. The whole job is collaborative.
Great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. Obviously, we're here to celebrate your success. But I think that I've heard this adage, like, we learn much more from our failures than we do from our successes sometimes. And so I was wondering, if it's not too embarrassing, are there any things that maybe didn't work out so well in a design
Great question.
experience that you learned from that would be helpful to share?
Well, I think my greatest failure was a film called Timeline. We shot in Montreal. And I absolutely loved Montreal. I had a great crew there, Canadian crew, absolutely wonderful. And I'd made the armour in England, which was all proper prop makers and all that. But I somehow, with the helmets, we hadn't tested it enough, so that when the stunt guys put it on, they couldn't really see through the gaps in the helmets. And it was like, oh, I felt so bad. And, you know, the whole design was quite slitty and evil and, so that was a real lesson. And it was test. So in Cruella, obviously we tested everything. And there was someone else who kept saying, test it. I think it was called Verbinski when we did Cure for Wellness, because when she's underwater, that dress, which is see-through white, was actually silk. But of course, in water, it just goes bleh. So we had to then remake it in polyester, which would then hold and actually work brilliantly underwater. But we hadn't tested it, and I got, you haven't tested this, you know. He was quite tricky, Gore. I mean, he's a really lovely person, and we were in the middle of nowhere, Germany, I think, doing it, which was great. But so yeah, I can't remember. I think everyone's memory tends to remember good things, not so much bad, which is kind of handy in life. But I can't remember. I mean, there must be tons of times I failed. But I think that also the whole thing, I do remember doing a tiny film where I didn't let the producer know. Well, I hadn't really kept an eye on the budget. And it was days when it was DIY productions. I mean, this whole thing of having a crew now, it's like still kind of weird to me. I mean, I think of the tiny amounts of people who used to, me included, dressing, undressing, anyone, crowd, whatever.
I think you did Room with a View with 4 people.
Four people in Florence. So Sally Turner looked after all the main artists. Corsets, Helena, Maggie, corsets, all the bits, and stiff collars on the men, and making sure. William Pierce, Eleanor Politi and I dressed and undressed all the crowds from a photographer's studio in the back streets of Venice. Venice? No, Florence. And then they walked onto the set. And, I mean, you didn't even think twice. You just did it.
And now we want a crew of 30.
Oh, it would have been, at least, and I don't know how I didn't die. I mean, we only did a 5-day week, thank God, and we walked everywhere. I mean, it was just...
No cell phones.
Oh, forget cell phones. They weren't even invented then. Well, they might have actually... No, I certainly didn't have one.
Hi, I'm such a huge fan of your work, and I wanted to ask, since you said you got your start in theater, since I'm an aspiring costume designer at my university currently at UCLA, last quarter I costume designed for a musical, and I'm graduating this June, so I wanted to ask, since you got your start in theater, like, what should I look for / do in the future, since I really want to pursue all this in the future?
It's changed so much in the 50 years, even 50 years plus that I left college. So it's always a little tricky for me to answer that one, except my advice to anyone is learn every skill you can to do with costume, plus making good tea and coffee, laundry, checking there isn't the pink sock in the white shirts, which was my first thing. I was sent to a small theatre company to go and do the laundry in a laundrette. You didn't have and I didn't notice the pink stocking, and they all came out pink. It wasn't good. And I didn't have any money to buy bleach to put it through the machine again, so I had to go back and confess. But learn sewing, cutting, making it. I can do everything, but not anything like as well as the people who can really do it. But it's really handy to be able to sew a hem, reback a waistcoat, do something if suddenly you need to do it.
Yeah.
Painting, dyeing, da-da-da. The other thing is, it's just possible that when you do become a designer, you don't actually enjoy it, because a massive amount of what I do is politics. Politics with directors, producers, politics within my crew, which I quite enjoy to some extent, and I certainly think I can do it without causing problems. It's better always to be kind and phenomenally polite. If you get cross, it does not do you any good. But I would learn every skill, because it might be there's something you really enjoy buying, art finishing, painting. I mean, there's so many things within our world that you really might enjoy. However, you also might enjoy the storytelling aspect, which is costume design. But,
Yeah.
you know, I would learn everything. And then you're available to go into a theatre or a film and start at the bottom and work your way up and watch how it works. Because the main mistake I think some young people make is thinking they're a designer and they go in all grand. Not a good idea.
I think a lot of students think that they can design. It's like 50% of our job is communication. So
Yeah.
I think what you're saying is really learn to communicate, because
Yeah.
that's going to be an asset.
Really helps.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Hi, thank you for being here. You sort of already answered my question, but from your background as a production and doing sculptures and everything, did you find not studying fabrics and sewing and fashion a benefit or a hindrance?
I think you learn so much as you go along. And of course, with John at Cosprop, I mean, I was working with the best cutters, wonderful fabrics, a real knowledge of what fabric works. So you didn't try and make a tailored garment out of a slurpy silk velvet, even though it had a lovely surface. It doesn't tailor well, you know. Simple stuff. And John totally guided me and taught me, and I just learned as I went along. I think I have a natural instinct for fabric. But I think it's worth learning everything. I don't think it's good to not know. But we were well taught at Central. It simply wasn't Ralph's thing. I mean, he actually said to me, darling, he was Hungaro-German. He said, darling, you're quite good at set design. Don't worry about the costume. You always get someone else to do them. And indeed he did. He got his wife and his various girlfriends, multiple. It was quite fun, actually, Central in those days, to do the costumes.
Do you use your sculptural design ideas in your costumes?
Yeah, certainly in the Baroness and Cruella. I mean, it was. I knew we needed fabric that had a real substance so that you could sculpt with it. And then Jane, of course, is the consummate, you know. But I was doing quite a lot of it too. So I'd put fabrics on the stand and drape them and then whiz them down, because she works out of Worthing, which is on the south coast of England, and I was at Shepperton. So it was the right side of London, but it was, you know, still
Track.
Yeah, a track, 70 odd miles. And obviously I went down there and I had a driver because it's big production. So we used to go down backwards and forwards. But we also have a shorthand, me and Jane, who I've known her since ever after, you know, which is a little while ago.
Wow.
So she made Drew and Angelica Houston and various. So Jane and I are really good friends as well. And her daughter was one of my assistants. But yeah.
Hi, my name is Jessica. Thank you for speaking. My question is, was there a mentor who made a particular impact in your life? And was there something that stuck with you all these years from what they taught you?
Well, John Bright of Cosprop. But the other mentor and the guy who really took the initial risk is James Ivory. And James Ivory, the director of Merchant Ivory and, you know, Room of the View and all that, he wrote me the most fantastic email, which I did quote the other, so I apologize if I'm repeating this, but it went thus. Jenny, I did not bring you up to run around deserts with semi-naked men and scantily dressed females in bits of old overall and transparent veil. I quite liked the chrome lips on the young man, but that was not your department, I guess. You're now living in Berlin, I hear. Maybe that's the cause for your abrupt change of costuming style. I've kept that. I mean, that was after Fury Road. And Jim was 86 when he saw Fury Road. And then he went on to confess he was a bit of a Mad Max fan and loved it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I am very short compared to this. Okay.
So have I sometimes.
Okay, you feel for me, but yeah. Hi. So, okay. I'm not a costumer, I'm actually a production designer. So when you're discussing things like how important is like your inspiration, your research, like, oh, this has this specific color, this has this texture. So something that I always like to do for myself when I work on films and TV is working with costumers, because I want to have the same, like I want our visions to match, or not match, or at least complement each other. I'm having a hard time with figuring out how to ask this for the last 20 minutes. But I think essentially when you were discussing the importance of how film and TV are collaborative, we're a village. How important is it to you to be able to work with someone like the production designer in order to, I guess, match your visions? Because like, have you experienced where like, oh, this is gray and blue, but then the production designer comes and goes, no, it's not, it's orange, you know? So how do you ensure that your vision can be respected as much as the production designers and create something beautiful, I guess?
Because you talk to them as early on as possible and you show them what you're thinking, and normally we're all in league. But things like Cruella, we were all at Shepperton, so the production design was up and we were on this floor and they were one floor up. So we were always up and down. Furiosa, we did work in this massive warehouse at Chullora, suburb of Sydney, and we had everything in one place. So you could absolutely, make sure you'd fit the actor and then you take them off to meet their vehicle, and Colin would be around and then we'd show them the props and, make sure it all worked. And if they had the props, did they need somewhere to keep the prop? Did it need a pocket? Did it need so the simple logistics. But colour-wise, I mean, I've never had a problem, but I've always been able to just share whatever my ideas were. And quite often a production designer's on before me, so you can see what they're up to. And if they did it in orange, it'd be like, the coral in orange would be odd.
But that's, I think,
Very
to your
odd.
point about communication. It's most of our
It's
job
communication.
is communication.
Absolutely right, yeah. It's the fun of it too. You're part of a team. And the cinematographer is the one who'll probably pull it all together and make it phenomenally amazing, and take it into that next level. But I've never, ever not been able to talk to makeup too. They have to be part of it.
Yeah.
And that's why I love it, really, because I'm not a fine artist or a fashion designer all on my own. I'm part of a team.
It's a team. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Hi, thank you so much. It's been just amazing hearing about your journey, and thank you so much for opening this discussion up. I had one last question. What is the best advice you've ever received, and what's the worst advice you've ever received?
Great way to end this.
Right. The best advice I've ever received. So I was doing Alexander, and day one I went to Pinewood and I met my crew, and they were very rudderless, and I thought, I can do this. I can do it. I can pull it together. I can. And I made them shut the door on the library. There were so many research books. They were drowning. All you need is the vases in the British Museum. They tell you everything you need to know. And I thought, I can do it. But I rang my friend Stephen, who I have mentioned before. We are going to get married. He's being a bit reticent, but, he'll give way eventually. And I said, Stephen, be ready at 5:30 in the morning. You're coming with me to Pinewood. So, of course, he was, and it was self-drive in those days, So we arrive at Pinewood, and the reality hit me that actually what we were taking on, we had 16 weeks to do the army, the Persian army, the Macedonian army, for the Battle of Gaugamela, all the principals in armour, get it to Morocco to fit. We're talking 1,500 people. Actually, the Macedonian army only wear a chiton, which is one piece of fabric, loose woven with pins here. And they needed knickers because obviously, and we were using the Moroccan army, and they needed armour. Anyway, Stephen just said to me, yes, we can, but we will do it in bite-sized chunks. And actually, it's my lesson for life. And so we did, and we did get it there, and we did get it to Morocco, and we did fit it, and the battle started on day one of shooting, with them all roaring around.
It's one rack at a time, not the whole
One rack at a time. Yes, bite-sized chunks. How do you eat an elephant? one bite at a time. But actually it's the same if your bedroom gets in a complete mess, which mine normally does. One drawer at a time. And then if you want to do another, fine, but you don't feel overwhelmed. And if you feel overwhelmed by any aspect of, the job, which is overwhelming, just one whatever at a time, and you'll be fine.
Thank you so much. I really
That's a great
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Well, thank you both so much for coming here. I also want to thank Warner Brothers Archives, Randall and Mark, for getting these beautiful pieces here today. Jenny's, if you guys haven't seen it, please take lots of photos, tag us, and thanks for coming, you guys.